Dean Ahmad Dalal, Madam Secretary General, honorable delegates and advisors, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I would like to congratulate you on yet another successful convening of one of the most powerful instruments for youth leadership development in the world. I have personally great memories of leading a delegation to this conference 8 years ago, when obviously it was not virtual. And I've been absolutely proud of the outcomes of this conference over the many years. And I'd like to thank you most sincerely for inviting me this year to be your keynote speaker. As a young man growing up in Nigeria in the late 80s and in the early 90s, my childhood was shaped by what I call repeated themes of violence, of political instability, of insecurity, fear, and absolute uncertainty about the future. I recall the mood in the country when, in 1993, a military dictator single-handedly annulled what was believed and adjudged to have been the freest and fairest elections in the country's history. I recall the country being turned absolutely upside down. My own education was thrown in jeopardy. My parents and I would navigate through protests every single day, waving tree branches just to make it to school. At that time, journalists were being routinely kidnapped, political opponents were imprisoned, environmental activists were executed. A prominent news editor, Delegiwa, was assassinated by letter bomb. Nobel Prize winning writer, Professor Wole Soyinka, was sentenced to death in absentia after he was charged for treason. And having jailed the man who legitimately won the presidential elections, his wife, who was also a prominent government critic, was gunned down on the streets of Lagos, and no one was charged for her murder. And after defrauding the national treasury of more than $5 billion, stashed away in banks across Europe, the ruling dictator of the country at the time declared himself president for life. And if you lived in Nigeria at this time, the one word that described your existence was fearful. And I lived through that. And outside the borders of Nigeria, we heard about people like Samuel Doe and Charles Taylor massacring Liberians. We heard about Mobutu Sese Seko and his 32-year reign of terror in the DR Congo. We learned how Gnassingbé Eyadema staged 2 military coups and ruled Togo with a fierce arm for 38 years. We learned about South Africa's struggle with racial injustice and a legacy of violence as citizens attempted to abolish that evil regime of apartheid. And then we heard about Rwanda. We learned about the senseless genocide that wiped out more than 1 million people in less than 100 days. And outside Africa, another genocide was being committed in Srebrenica almost concurrently. As a young person growing up in that world at that time, it was very, very difficult to have hope. And I asked myself a few questions. First of all, is there anyone out there who sees what is going on in our countries? Secondly, does anyone care? And then, where is the United Nations? And as I grappled with these thoughts, I learned 3 lessons very, very quickly. First of all, I learned that you can criticize governments, but only do so in the comfort of your bedroom. And then you have to hope and pray that your family members are not informants. And trust me, that's not guaranteed. Secondly, I learned that you can pursue any career that you choose as long as it has nothing to do with politics. I learned that politics is a corrupt game that is reserved for crooks and thugs and people with no morality. That's what I was believing. And thirdly, I learned that the most dangerous job in the world is not the job of a firefighter. It's not the job of a combat soldier. It's not the job of a cave miner. I learned at that time that the most dangerous job on earth, for which you are very likely to sacrifice your life, is to be a political journalist in an anti-democratic society. And so I became a journalist 15 years ago. And when you fast forward from that world to the world today, you realize that we are confronted by a very different set of challenges. And these are challenges which are no less debilitating than those we faced 2 or 3 decades ago. COVID-19 has exposed nearly all of the fault lines in the world. It has revealed the vast inequities in healthcare, in job security, sustainable livelihoods, access to safe homes, clean water, and food. In your committees, you will grapple with the reality of modern-day slavery and child trafficking. You will have to respond to unending episodes of xenophobic violence against migrants, not just in South Africa, but across the world. On the one hand, many of us have become desensitized to the plight of the Rohingya population in Myanmar. But then almost simultaneously, we are awakened to concerns about the military's overthrow of a democratic process in the exact same country. All of these issues matter. And as we go on trying to navigate this new world of COVID-19, we've seen a rise in anti-Asian sentiments, and in some cases, overt abuse in various parts of the world. And as we condemn those who have mislabeled the coronavirus as the Chinese virus, a very terrible thing to say, in the same breath, we must condemn the abuse of Uyghur Muslims in parts of China under the guise of re-education. And as a former journalist and someone who had met and deeply respected Jamal Khashoggi, you can imagine my feelings about politically motivated assassinations in any part of the world. And I know that we are all eager to get back to some kind of normal. But the truth is, our world is not normal. Our world has not been normal for a very long time. And so maybe you, like me, have asked yourself the questions. Is anyone out there who sees what is going on in our countries? Does anyone care? And where is the United Nations? And while we applaud, and we must continue to applaud the United Nations for everything it has achieved in its 76 years, we must never stop striving for a better, fairer, and more inclusive world. We have no choice. We have no choice but to attain the Sustainable Development Goals within the time frame that has been set for it. And even though COVID-19 sets that time frame back by an estimated 64 years, this is the time for unprecedented collaboration across governments, multilateral agencies, corporate organizations, social entrepreneurs, philanthropists, and ordinary citizens like you and me. And so, where does that leave you? What is your unique role at this time? In this moment, how will you help to imagine a resilient future and to shape a better world? It all begins with education. The daily training of our minds to understand the world in which we live, to ask some difficult questions about why things are the way they are, and more importantly, how they can be different. And then you must engage with your entire being. Whether or not you pursue a career in diplomacy, and many of you will not, you must never stop speaking up and advocating for social justice and respect for the rights of every individual. Former British Prime Minister Tony Blair said in a speech in 2008 that each new generation finds the world they enter, but they fashion the world they live. So, what do you inherit? And what do you pass on? No matter what comes at us, we must never bow to fear. We must never give in to cynicism, and we must never pursue personal comforts at the expense of societal advancement. The truth is, none of us is safe until all of us are safe. None of us is healthy until all of us are healthy. And none of us is truly prosperous until all of us are prosperous. As COVID-19 has proven, the whole world can be brought to a standstill if we neglect to pay attention to what happens in the seemingly small corners of the world. So this is your time to do things differently. As I conclude, I'd like to congratulate you all for making the right decision to spend the next few days investing in this very important process. Model UN conferences are not a joke, they're not a game. And I believe very, very strongly that there could hardly be any better platform to prepare you for the difficulties of today and the unimaginable challenges of tomorrow. And so we need your courage, we need your ideas, and most importantly, we need your optimism. Over the next 2 days, I wish you a lot of luck and Godspeed. Thank you very much for your attention.